Because one of the things you'll notice with the western toad here as you look at it, that it will try to...
In BC forestry, at least in the Omnica region that I'm somewhat familiar with, when we lay out blocks, we need to come up with what's called the best management practices, the BMPs, for fish streams, bear den, migratory bird, cavity trees, mesocarnivores, mineral licks, ungulate range, rare ecos, and the list goes on forever. But I've never heard of anybody mention anything about BMPs for amphibian. And Mark has something to say about that.
And so I've been working with, so here we're in Nakasley, Watan, Glasden, and Binche, Watan territory. I work a lot with the First Nations here, and working with forestry, and that relationship between forestry and wildlife is an area that I'm actively involved in within Ecologic and trying to transform resource management. And when it comes to forestry and amphibians, there is a serious problem. It is not working. If you go out and you look at forest harvesting environments, the amphibians are just dead. They just die in forestry. They, of course, some survive, but it's deceptive. The numbers it's a large kill zone. What happens is you get large machinery that comes in, builds roads, you get compaction, you get a change in the surface water flow dynamics. It changes the hydrodynamics into the extended watershed. And so you'll actually see, if you look at time-lapse remote sensing, you'll see a road come in, and then you'll see a wetland and adjacent area, and you start seeing it like fluctuate. The hydrology of it starts to swing rapidly, and then you see another road come in. And what happens is those roads, because they get mineral soil exposed, and you get compaction, it creates nice warm spring pools, and the toads come in and like, woo, and like, so it's like very prime optimal sauna hot tub breeding time for the adults. Like, it's like, wow, this is a perfect breeding habitat. It's warm, and then they start breeding in there, and they lay their eggs. But come later in the season, it's a death trap. So the eggs and the larvae just invariably get wiped out. Now, I've been out to harvest areas where the stench from the death is just too much to handle. I've been up to, ankle high depth and corpses of amphibians throughout the forest sector. And so this is something that I've been trying to work with forest industry to find leadership into there to say, okay, it is an issue. We need to get real about it, and we need to adjust because it's not acceptable. We got to change practice. We got to figure out how to do that. And so we got to relearn that practice. Well, if we looked at western toads the way we look at salmon, it would be on the news at night every day about what we're doing to the western toad. Yeah, so the forest is a story of history. And there's an entire, it's a book, and if you can learn how to read it, it's pretty amazing. And it's not, once you observe, it's actually becomes more and more interesting, because everything falls down. And, this is kind of like a living stomach in one way that's open, and it's eating itself. It's kind of weird. And so the history is just like on the surface of the material, and as you can see, you got your leaves on the top, and as you go further down, you get your more decomposed layers. These are just leaves of old that are integrated with fungal hyphal networks that are decomposing, but there's also tiny little invertebrates that are in here. And this is that relationship between, I talked about the amphibians, is that they're the regulators of the forest invertebrate community that is the munchers of the material that is falling down on the forest floor. So if you take out the keystone vertebrate predator that's eating that invertebrate biomass, then this stuff goes out of kilter and it turns into carbon released in the air because you got a drop in the invertebrate community because you lost your predator. and then your forest ecosystems go haywire. So this is the history of what's been falling on the floor, and these are the pages of the book of your forest ecosystems. And so your logs falling down the course of the debris. You know, I mean, I just want you guys to know, you know, that despite, you know, I think it was Socrates that said, you know, like that, you know, I'm the wisest of them all because I know that what I know is nothing. And so, you know, that's kind of like, I think what I would like everybody to think about, like, and I still feel as I'm getting older, like how little I know. So we often think in forestry we got it figured out. We know, like, we got our books with our percent cover, and we got a recipe, and we know how to do block layout, and it sounds very smart and very intelligent of how we figured it out. But we don't have it figured out. We're screwing it up royally. We got fires and floods, and we're changing the planet, and the First Nations are also not happy about it. They've declared through community resolution a state of emergency within this area with respect to forest harvesting and climate change. So, and that's shifting now because we've got the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, we got the United Declaration and Indigenous rights, and things are changing where they are bringing forward their cultural legacy of being connected to stewardship, and they've done better than scientists, I think. Well, not that I think, we have the evidence that they've done better than scientists in managing natural resources. So, and so with that, every little thing is becoming important in understanding how it connects and works together. And you're going to be doing that in your career in forestry, working with First Nations and figuring that out. So, coarse wood debris is an example that you don't hear much. Well, I mean, there's a little bit in forestry about, you know, how much coarse wood debris density might be left, and you will study it in your standard kind of forest plot approach, where you would do like a plot chord, 3.99 or 7.99. If you looked at the BC terrestrial ecosystem land management handbook, it comes with the techniques of how you study coarse wood debris. I think actually they don't even call it coarse wood debris anymore. It's now called coarse woody resources or something like that is the new name for it they've come up with, because they don't want to call it like debris or garbage, whatever. It's so this is long-toed salamander habitat here. Very quickly, you know, I'm not an experienced coarse wood debris guy anymore. Haven't done it for many years, but you know, I would say this is probably a class 3. You're starting to get moss. You still got some hardness to it, and you can break it apart. It's still got some stuff. This is your classic long-toed salamander type of habitat, and so you're going to want to survey this kind of habitat. You can flip over the logs, and they will go, and they're amazing diggers. And I'm just, you know, from experience of knowing this and pulling this apart, this doesn't feel like good long-toed salamander because this is a little too soft in the middle here. Like this stuff, they won't go into that too much. They want more like the protection from the harder material, or they will go on the bottom underneath. I always looked at birch and thought, oh, you find birch on the fourth floor and you pick it up, you can shake it out, and then you got a birch tube of the bark. And I never found long-toed salamanders in there. And then so he took out his knife and started like stripping the bark off, and I was like, oh, you won't find long-toed salamanders in birch. But these were like birch where the rain had just started to like soften the very top, and he pulled off the bark, and there's salamanders wedged in the tree, like I was like, how in the hell they get in there? Like micro spaces in the middle of a birch tree that had fallen on the floor. And then we went to the next plot, 2. I went to the next plot, 3. Like I was like, what? We never looked in the birch. Like I never thought to cut the bark off, flip it out on the birch, because I've been looking at birch, it was too decayed. So, but they like that hard wood and they go into there. But you will also find them under places like this. So this is where you're going to find long-toed salamanders. It's dry here. This one's quite decomposed. Do a little bit of site restoration so you don't destroy the forest. So I flip a log, look back. But you really got to get in and get your fingers in to find long-toed salamanders. But you really got to get in and Get your fingers in. Oh, we got a salamander! You know, on day one, this isn't going to work, you know, but, you know, it's like people are professional trackers for many, many years, and it's a real skill. And some people have a real knack for it, you know, I've been out, so some of the... I've had jobs and I hated it, and so the BC Wildlife Act, best management practices, got a construction project, okay, let's isolate with fencing. I worked on wetlands like this, where they're draining it, and I have to go in and capture all the frogs and pull them out, put them aside, and then you know, because you know, they're worried about a highway hillslide. I've done like 70 wetlands, pulling them. What a waste of my time and my talent. That I got to go capture and do this mitigation salvage to move them out of there and put them into another side. Let's get ecology and science back into here, because if I take the frogs out of here, put them over there, they're going to die. I mean, and plus those toads over there are going to be like, you know, immigrants are coming into my turf, man, and they're not going to do well. And we're going to be spreading the disease. So how's that good management practice? So I think that we need leadership, people start to talk about this. And so that's where I'm trying to come forward with this, is that the idea of an amphibian, it should be viewed in the same lens as a salmon in our watersheds. We would not allow what's happening to amphibians if they were salmon. And so First Nations that I've talked to, the elders, they take this seriously. And foresters do take it seriously. It's about awareness and knowing. And so I think we just got to rethink and refigure out how we can balance that, because if we want to have a future of forestry, if we want to have a future of economy, then we got to keep the toads and frogs and salamanders employed in doing the services and work they do. In the billions, they are moving mountains across this province. They are the bioenergetic creatures that are keeping our resources alive and sustained. And so if you're losing that, then you're a poor forester, and you don't have the evidence, I think, to build a case that you're doing good forestry. I'm doing courses on environmental management, you know, with forestry companies, and I'm just like, well, good for teaching us like how good you're doing environmental work, but we got to actually get real here, and that's just my message on that, is that let's create habitats that create survivorship for amphibians, and it's not difficult. I can take you guys out in one season and I could show you how easy it is to see the consequence, the effect of mortality from forestry. It's very evident. It's extremely evident. And so I think that if everybody saw that, I think that everybody would be like, yeah, we shouldn't do that.
Mark, thank you so much for coming out.
Yeah.
We got to get going to our next module. We appreciate it. You're welcome to join us for lunch. Did you get a sandwich? Did you grab something?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
Forestry can be a really heavy topic. It's a form of land use management that affects a lot of people. I love receiving different views and opinion and challenging my own beliefs. It's like traveling to a foreign country and seeing what it's all about. But I can't do that all day long. Sometimes I just want to chill and relax and look at animals for a while. And this module is all about animals and ways researchers use to monitor and study them.
And so the reason we have this set up like this is so that we get animals kind of running on this little run pole, and they'll kind of stand up and try and get this bait. And when they do that, they show their ventrum, so they all have like a unique chest pattern, and you can identify individuals. So Shannon was just saying you were identifying some of the individual wolverine and fisher. How many did we get?
Four different wolverine using it during the winter, and 6 different fisher at a minimum count. That's what ones we could ID.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool. It's like really effective and really cool way. A lot of other species will run up here and mess around, and so it's kind of interesting. It just kind of shows some interesting behavior as they're interacting with the bait. And the bait's really small, so it's not like they're getting like habituated to a bunch of food source. It's not like they're like coming here for a full meal deal. Like this is just a quick little bite for everybody, and then off they go. So the other part, so that video Shannon showed of the lynx going crazy on this, was this little gun brush. So, actually, do you have some of those gun brushes? I should pass them around. So it's just a normal little wire gun brush, just on the end of this little stick here. And then we'll drop the sort of lure, so it's got beaver castor in it and catnip. So it just goes on the side here, and they'll just come over and go crazy.
It actually has catnip in it.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, that's why they're like going nuts. So they're just like a normal cat.
I love that.
Yeah.
I did not know this about lynx.
Yes, then when we come to the site, we come and check and you see if there's any hair on it, and if there is, you gently unscrew it, put it in an envelope, and then we'll send it away for genetic analysis and can get a whole bunch of information about them from that. Another way that we collect hair for different species is these little boxes. So this is our little like fisher box. So on the inside here you can see there's some little strips. Those are just little chunks of those, you know those really awful mouse traps that are like sticky? So those are just little strips of those. And then in the back there you've got like a little piece of bait that'll be hanging in the back. So we'll pack this into the snow and put a bunch of boughs over it. And we're hoping this is the right little diameter that the fisher will come and shove his head in there. And when he does, we'll get a little spa treatment. We give him a little wax. And we just get a couple hair samples on there. So if we come and check and say, oh yeah, we got a hair sample, so we'll unscrew that and send that away for analysis as well. And you can check the camera and you can see what species you got. We get a lot of squirrels going after the bait in there. But we've got lots of cool things. We had one time a fisher shoved his head in, and we saw him on the camera walking around. He had a big porcupine quill sticking out of his face. And when he shoved his head in and he came out, he didn't have it anymore. When I showed up, I saw a quill on the little sticky pad. So
One thing I want to mention before we leave the site is, so what we're talking about, we talked about all those things about, you know, trying to figure out why and what to monitor, and this is how we monitor, right? So this is looking at what we use and trying to limit the biases with different survey techniques. And we're talking about the catnip lure. Now that, for those that aren't familiar, I mean, everybody knows cats like it, but that is consistent in the feline family. So things up to lions will rub, and lynx and house cats, right? So it goes back, way back in their DNA, inherent nature to rub in relation to catnip. And so that's what we're trying to do, is take advantage. And we were really excited at first because this is a thing that is kind of cool, right? You put it out there and the lynx kind of voluntarily rubs on it. You know, you're not grabbing them and pulling the hair out, right? They like it and they leave behind some hair for you. But one of the things we found is that it actually has some real biases with it. So males versus females. So males will rub more than females. Season is really important. So if you put it during the breeding season, it can work really well. In the States, they were doing this, you know, where they're threatened species, they were doing this national lynx detection protocol, and they put it all across different states. And a lot of those they did during the fall. Well, we found the fall is the absolute worst. They don't rub during the fall at all. So they were putting out all these, getting zeros on their detections, but lynx aren't rubbing them, and they didn't have cameras to test that back then. And then the other big one that's really now influenced, why we probably won't be using this much anymore, is that there's also a difference depending on the stage of the cycle. Because during the low in the hair cycle, they're not breeding as much, so they're not rubbing as much. So we have lots of animals, videos of them, just walking right by, not even bothering to rub. Where during the hair high, when there's lots of competition and everybody's trying to, produce lots of kittens, they produce, 4 or 5 kitten litters during that time period, they rub all the time. So you might be able to get away with it, but it's not very useful if you can only during that time in that season.
My two biggest takeaway from coming back to school are, 1, it reignites my sense of curiosity about things, and 2, always challenge myself and the information I'm receiving. Just like Shannon mentioned the source of biases in his study, I think it's important to know in forestry, we tend to have what's called the false consensus bias, meaning we think the views of the people around us reflect the general population. And I found that bias applied to both forestry communities and conservation activists. You're gonna jump or what? Hell yeah! Day 9. we had a medicine man, Jonas, to show us what to do if we forgot our sunscreen in the bush. Which plant is good for toothache or for your heart? Which plants are edibles and when they are edible? Almost everything you can find in the bush is useful to Jonas in one way or another. I got permission from him to document an entire module, and every time we made eye contact, we would just giggle for no reason. He's a lovely and knowledgeable person, and I hope you enjoy this as much as I do.
These are the ones that I tell you that it's good for toothache. Put that stick and put it in your toothache. And I had some I gathered in a small jar, and I showed it to an elder. And I told him what it was. It was from the balsam blisters. And he said that was what they used a long time ago for internal bleeding. When they were bleeding from the stomach, they would use that.
What do you call it?
Gugame.
Gugame.
It's I know all the carrier names for most of my plants and animals and that. And this one here is a false Solomon seal. These ones here are edible also. They're a sweet berry. They're sweet berry and they have a seed in there. And we use that as a sweetener. And some of the berries that we harvest is like hawthorn berries. They're really bland, like they have no flavor. We'd mix some of these berries with them and then sweeten other berries. These boughs here, when you go out camping from these balsam trees, you get these young trees like this, and you just overlap it, and you can make yourself a good bed when you're camping. Yeah, the birch tree too. The birch tree is something that our ancestors, they used a lot too. Like, they used it for baskets. They used the baskets for berry picking, for eating, even for drinking. Cups, they made cups out of it now. And they used it for canoes. And they used it also for roofing. And they used it for roofing in their shelters. And you could take branches like that, just branches from like that, and it makes a good tea. A good tea, you could make a tea out of just branches and that. You don't have to get the whole tree. And in the springtime, if you have a knife or something sharp, you could just take it and make a little hole in there, and that sap will start coming out, and you could just bring some of that sap in there. The mountain alder, we used the mountain alder quite a bit for, we made rope for it a long time ago, and they use it for like fish nets, anchors. I don't know, we'll come across some alder, I'll show you. That one too, when the seeds they first start coming out, those are edible too. Like if you're starving in the bush and you have no food, you could take that berries and chew it. It's very bitter, but it'll keep you going. Go on and find people harvest it for food for winter. The snowberries, any white berries, we don't eat any white berries. The snowberry and the grouseberry are white berries, and I think that's one of the last berries that the bear eats before it hibernates. Like a thimbleberry.
They're so good.
Yeah, they're so good.
It's my favorite berry.
This is fireweed. It's only harvested before the flowers come out. Once the flowers come out, we don't harvest it. My father, when he was alive, he said they used to harvest it when you remember when he was a little kid. They would just take it and take all the leaves off and then cut it off at the ground and then just put it on rocks, dry it on the rocks, and then put it away for the winter. In the winter they rehydrate it and then they eat it. In the springtime, before the leaves, when they first come out, they're just about this tall or so. You could take it and cut it right at the ground And then you peel out the outer layer. There's a thin film you could peel off. And then you could eat the inside of that. It's very succulent and watery, like juicy. And that's what our people they eat in the springtime, because they ate so much dry food in the winter, like dry meat, dry fish. Every berries they dried for the winter. And they build up a lot of toxins in their body. And they would eat this a lot in the spring to clean out the toxins. Same with the cow parsnip. When the cow parsnip first comes out in the spring, that too, you do the same thing. You peel out the bottom part and eat the inside. And that one, when it first comes out in the spring, the cow parsnip, it's a bulb. It looks something like this. It's just coming out of the ground in the spring. You could take that and eat the whole thing. You eat the whole thing. It's just like you could make a salad with it. And this here is a poplar tree. If you get to some young poplar tree, or even some of the bigger poplar trees, like let's say you go in a bush and you don't have any sunblock, you could take that. There's a grey film that goes in your hand. You probably could find it. Now here's the pit house. Like our ancestors, they used this here as a winter dwelling. Like this here is more modern. They made it with power saws and that, but our people long ago they just used, whenever they make firewood, they would burn it down. They would burn down the dry tree, then they would burn it into sections and bring it to wherever they're going to have their winter camp. Like they would pick a winter camp where there would be lots of lots of dead trees and that. And they would be underground. That's where all our ancestors, they taught the youth. It was like a school in the winter because they were mostly in one place. Then sometimes maybe a medicine man would get up and talk about plants, or a hunter would come up and tell you stories. And a lot of the stories were, they had to teach their place names, what kind of animals they got there, and what time of the year. They passed on the knowledge like that. And they also passed on a lot of the legends. A lot of the legends, they come back from 1700s and that. Like these were handed down. There was an elder living in Trembler Lake. It's just north of Stewart Lake. You go up the Tatsy River and there's Trembler Lake. There's a community there that an elder came from. He lived to be 108 years old. And he was a dreamer. He used to dream. One time he told his son to be really careful, he said. He said, I had a real bad dream last night and I seen blood all over the land. He said, I want you kids to be careful. His son she was talking to. And that what it was when he had that dream, it was when that beetle kill, when all the trees they turned red. That's what he dreamt about. He also dreamt about another lady that was sent home from the hospital. They just sent her home to die. They didn't know what was wrong with her. And he dreamt about that woman in the winter time. And he also dreamt about cranberries. You know, the cranberries are really hardy. In the winter time, if you go out, sometimes you'll find some of those berries still hanging on the bush. And even in the springtime, you'll find some of them. So he got some young people to go out in the winter, and then they gathered cranberries. And then they made medicine for her, and it healed her. So he healed it through the dreams. That was how some of our medicine came to our people, through dreams. And some of it by trial and error. And watching the animals too, what the animals they eat.
The story of this dreamer was only a small portion of all the stories he shared with us that day. We sat in the pit house for probably an hour, and he just pulled story after story out of his pocket non-stop. Jonas told me that someone in the past wanted to film a documentary with him for money. He turned them down. He said he would never share his knowledge for money. But he gave me the green light to film because I promised him I was making this video to share what we learned in field school with more people. It's absolutely not for money. I'm nowhere near a professional filmmaker or a documentary producer. But Jonas, if you're watching this, I hope you're not too disappointed with my amateur production skills. When we go back to the cinnabar, because we got so many people sick at camp, Jonas went to the bush in the back to make them balsam medicine using subalpine forest bark. And I tagged along with a camera.
That's called hawthorn. And this is really good heart medicine.
Heart medicine.
The Chinese, they use it for thousands of years. What I like to do is just clean the bark off.
Okay.
Wow.
That comes off quite easily, hey?
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm putting together the recipe. There you go. It's good to go.
Thank
Put
you
that
so
much water in
much.
there.
Okay, right there.
Once you get to boiling really hard, you could just turn on the heat so it's just simmering, but not really softly. A little bit harder. like,
Okay.
not too softly, but just as long as it keeps boiling.
Okay, so a little bit above simmer. Yeah.
Yeah, turn it down a little bit. And
And 3 hours.
I've been waiting for 3 minutes.
Time flies when you're having fun. But at this point, I was ready for my own bed and a good sleep without bedtime karaoke in cabin 3 every night.
Hell yeah!
Day 10 and 12, we had IFS to show us the basic of timber cruising and ecotyping for site level planning, and 3 different licensees to show us how they do total chance planning using real life examples. It was really helpful. If you're wondering why everyone is carving spoons, and that's because every year, field camp students will leave a souvenir with autographs at the Jump Prince Research Forest. So this year, Lucas came up with this idea to carve spoons and leave them as our souvenir. I might be a little biased here, but this is the best one so far. This year, out of almost 30 people at camp, 25 of us got a little sniffle. Hence why we're the ear of plague. Lauren and Shannon also gave us some trail cameras to set up to capture animals in our guild for fun. And we got footage of branches moving, people canoeing, bear walking down the trail, and...
This.
When did you do that?
Which is not surprising. It's not surprising at all.
Of course, this is still a 3rd year level course, so Roy made sure we were busy every day to learn something new.
What does balsam, spruce, and pine all become in age 121?
Pulp.
Sometimes.
Really great wildlife habitat.
Yeah. They become.
Bit of a forester.
Don't worry, we're just joking around. The last assignment of the course was a case study to use everything we have learned so far from field school and develop a blog that generates enough volume to pay the bills for the Jump Prince Research Forest, but also maintaining forest biodiversity and ecosystem services as well as various stakeholder and rights holders' value. We went out to the field to recce the block and came back to develop a site plan, a landscape plan, and a long-term monitoring plan. Then we pitched the idea to staff at Jump Prince Research Forest and answered some really hard questions. This is Chris, by the way. He made some amazing food, and field camp was so much better because of his cooking. Honestly, when I first learned that I would miss 2 weeks of work and spend money to learn road layout in field school, I tried everything I could to get out of the course. I literally do forestry field work for a living. But the chair shut me right down and I was pretty cranky for a while. But now I just want to thank him for not making me miss this inspiring course that's so important to those who want to become a professional forester in BC. Do you guys have anything to say for next year forestry students have to do this field camp?
Swim every day.
Yes.
Swim every day.
I think it's important that you take it very seriously. There's a lot of really good stuff to learn at camp, and the biggest part is to take it all forward into our careers.
Good job, Cooper. Well said.
One of the things I'm really trying to get my forestry field school students to understand, and it becomes very evident at field school each year after day 2 or 3 that we're doing field school, is that forestry is really complicated stuff. The practice of forestry, of professional forestry, is really complicated, and I like to try and quote, and I think I have successfully at least once or twice each field school for the last 6 or 7 years, a quote by Fred Bunnell, who was a forestry professor at UBC, who said, "Forestry is not rocket science, it's more complicated than that." And that, to me, really says a lot about how difficult it is and how complex it is to practice forestry in this day and age in an environment in which you have rights holders that are concerned about how you are managing forests in their traditional territory. You've got guide outfitters, trappers, folks running open range cattle who are really concerned about what you're leaving behind and not just what you're taking out of these forests, because they value them in a different way than maybe the timber company or the forestry company does that you're working for. The other thing I'm really trying to impress upon my students, and I ask them every year, and I just asked it this year as well, by a show of hands, how many of you are going to go into professional forestry, want to be a professional forester? And almost everybody, with the exception of maybe the odd biology student or wildlife and fisheries student who's going in to become a professional biologist, most of my students will put up their hand indicating that they do want to become a professional forester. So then I tell them, and this is what field camp is all about, guys. What we're trying to teach you is this thing that's embedded in your standards and codes of ethical and professional conduct. If you look in that for Forest Professionals BC, you'll see Bylaw 9, Schedule A, Standard 6B says that you have to uphold forest stewardship, practice the responsible use of forest resources based on an application of an ecological understanding at the stand, forest, and landscape level that maintains and protects ecosystem function, integrity, and resilience. And that really is what we're trying to do, is get you to think about the forest more broadly, maintain that ecosystem function, integrity, and resilience, and think about not just the biodiversity, but also all of the other human values that are embedded in a stand of a forest, or in the forest, or at the landscape level that everybody would like to see that forest have. Not just see that forest for the timber or lumber value, but see it for all of its values. And that's the essence of what we're trying to do at NREM 333 Forestry Field School.
There are many people from different backgrounds who share their own opinion on how BC forests should be managed. You might agree with some, disagree with some, and some statements might raise your blood pressure a little. This video is not intended to divide us even more. Instead, it's intended to promote a healthy communication, to truly listen to those who share different views with us, and to work together to find solutions. In a year or so, we'll all graduate from UNBC and spread out in the big bad world. Some might do nothing forestry related, some might be joining the ministry or a licensee where the rubber meets the road. I hope this video can shine a light on your forestry journey when you're pacing back and forth and facing those hard, challenging decisions. From the bottom of my heart, thank you to all presenters, professor, and educator for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, and your perspective with us. Thank you, and take care.